Hi, this is Celeste Taylor, and you found yourself in the lesbian class. Whether you're on a road trip, organizing your classroom library, or relaxing with some tea, I'm so happy you're here, and I hope you get a few takeaways. Ring, ring! Class is in session. Today's guest is Haley, a kindergarten teacher in her 6th year teaching. She has her master's degree in language and literacy and is working toward her 2nd master's degree in early education policy and leadership. She's lesbian and uses she, her pronouns. Welcome to the lesbian class, Haley.
Hi, thank you for having me.
Thank you for coming on. And it's always wonderful to have another lesbian on my lesbian podcast.
Woo woo.
We have some stuff in common. You're a kinder teacher. I taught kinder. It's the beginning-ish of the school year. How's everything going?
Beginning-ish is definitely a word I would use. I have to remind myself that in my district, we are only 12 days in, so they are still learning, but they are very much beginning, need everything given to them, but we expect so much from them, but they're babies. They're babies.
Yes, and before we started recording, I was needing to troubleshoot something, and Haley is an extremely patient person, I will say to everyone. So you would probably be the best kindergarten teacher around.
Thank you. And you know what's wild about that? I have patience for children up until a certain point. Like middle school, high school couldn't be me. But with like adults that know better, I really don't have patience. It's funny. I pick and choose when I have patience, but I guess that's what makes me a kindergarten teacher. That's why I like being a kindergarten teacher.
Kinder teachers are usually the first teachers kids will have, aside from preschool teachers, but it's a little bit different. It's usually just a few hours a day when they go to preschool, you know. Are you a full day or a half day kindergarten?
We are full day, 7:50 to about 3 o'clock all day. So it's very strenuous on the kiddos and it's hard in the afternoons are a struggle. That's why we have all of our core in the morning. But something that I am passionate about always doing for other kinder teachers, I would recommend is no matter when we're supposed to start curriculum, I always start the day out with something called a morning meeting. Whether it's 2 minutes, whether it's 10 minutes, we sit in a circle, we talk about how we're feeling, we express the needs of the day, and we review what happened yesterday, how can we fix it, or if it was a great day, we just move on with our curriculum. But we review so they can reflect and understand. And that has built the relationships I've had with the kids the past 2 years in my district that I've been in. I'm going on my 3rd, that they still come knock on my door. And I think that means everything above everything is relationships before curriculum. And that's how I run my classroom.
100%. I think I even have a TikTok about that, relationships first. Yeah. And especially with the littles, you know, it's so powerful that you're teaching them to review, to reflect, to work on things. If there were issues with other students or maybe something that went down in the classroom, who knows, it could be anything, to talk about it, to build that social, emotional fortitude and strength. And it's really going to serve them in their futures.
I try, and it's not easy. I show a lot of frustration. I got frustrated really today. We're still learning, and I stop and I apologize to the students when I make a mistake, and we talk about our feelings because sometimes they don't realize that you have feelings too, even though you're a bigger kid in a sense, an adult. And so they're like, "You have feelings too?" Yes, and we're going to talk about them. I do too. So that's something that they have to resolve as well.
Yeah, that's very healthy. Good job. I support
Thank
that.
you.
And I think,
Thank you.
And I always started my class every day with morning meetings as well.
I love that. Yes.
It's perfect, especially too if you have a lot of late birds, which certain years I had. You have your regular late birds, you know, And so it's such a great way not to start instruction, but to also, and not have these late birds come in interrupting a lesson or anything. They're just coming in late and joining morning meeting, you know?
Oh, 100%. I agree.
With the beginning of the school year, and I've been ear to the ground a bit about districts that are blatantly banning queer literature. And I'm curious what your district's policy, if they have a policy on queer literature, if, because at one point, a school district in Maryland had adopted 5 gay storybooks to be used with the curriculum, as resources, but 2 of them got banned, and then I guess now they potentially have 3, but I'm just curious to know. I always talk about And Tango Makes Three because a dear friend of mine gifted me that book, and I always read it, to my kids, especially when I was teaching 3rd or 4th grade. But um, would you feel comfortable in your classroom reading a queer storybook?
I personally would feel comfortable, but the issue that arises is just, and it goes with how I've been treated in the past. Although we have a no discrimination policy, and I feel like my administration would back me up because you can't discriminate. That's against our policy. However, I feel when it came down to it, there would be such an uproar of issues in our community because it's very red, it's very conservative in the area we are. And that doesn't mean it's not a bad area, but it is Jesus saves, and that's about it, and you can't be different. But there are many books, like, for example, the Our Class is a Family book or All Are Welcome. It doesn't necessarily say anything about different types of families, but it has pictures, and a few of the little pictures on there are like a queer presenting female couple. And it's very tiny, but that's as far as comfortability as I feel at the moment in my district. But that's just my own personal belief. I would love to read more queer literature, but in the back of my head, will that be accepted? Because we're a very conservative area, and a lot of people, and I love my team, but they're very Christian, very conservative, and that's wonderful. I love that for them, and I'm glad they accept me for who I am. But it's always in the back of their head and in the back of mine a little bit.
I was going to ask you if you're out on campus.
Yes, I am. It took me a little bit based on my past. When I first got my job in my district, unless you were friends with me on Facebook, you wouldn't know, and I kept it that way. I kept it. Obviously, I'm very femme presenting, very straight presenting, and I can benefit from that, and I don't mind that in situations to keep me safe. However, when I started getting more comfortable with my team at the time, I would slowly start to tell them. And then when I felt comfortable with everybody, after some fiascos that happened with other staff members, I felt more confident in telling everybody. And now some people ask me how me and my partner are doing, and some people don't want to hear it, and that's okay. They ask how I'm doing, that's okay. But everybody knows, if you're most of my coworkers on who are friends with me on like social media know about my partner, it's probably not accepted, but that's okay because once you come through those doors, it's about those kids. So if people have biases, they don't say it to my face.
Okay, that's what I was going to ask too. Is everyone's accepting of you on a certain level, but are are there any whisperings or whatnot? You know what I'm saying? Or are you excluded from anything or stuff like that?
I personally don't know if I am, but I kind of if I am, I've tuned it out. One of my best friends is a third grade teacher in the district that I work for, but we became friends from getting hired on at the same time. And she's Christian in the best way, but she's also like right up my alley, and she's fully accepting. So I have a comfortability and I can confide in her. But there are some people that just I don't think will ever accept it, and that's okay. But they love me and accept who I am as a teacher. But it's that thing, oh, it's a sin, but I love you anyway, kind of, and I've been told that. So
Mhm.
that's where I'm like,
Right.
I kind of tune it out if it is there. But I love my district and I love the people I work for. So if it is in their heads, it's not being said out loud because I feel like their jobs would be on the line because of our discrimination policy.
Okay.
But I am, as far as I know, the only queer educator in my area. I don't know about district because our district is large. But for elementary schools, I believe the only one that I know of.
Well, I mean, that you know of, but
That I know of.
I mean, come on, we're talking numbers here. So,
Yes.
so, so what you're saying, what I'm hearing is that then all the other queer gals are at least also femme presenting like you.
Yes. What I believe so, yes. Because if you didn't know and I didn't talk about it,
Yeah.
like you would have no idea, really.
Right.
My
Right.
day-to-day life, you don't. And I do that for myself and for my safety, but also because it's one half of me, it's not all of me.
It is something to be able to be ourselves, right?
Yes.
Fully ourselves and not have to think, oh gosh, I've got to change pronouns when I talk about my partner, or oh gosh, I can't talk about my wife, or I can't talk about my girlfriend or whomever, I can't talk about my
Yes.
partner freely without any thought, right? Of,
Yes.
oh crap, I let something slip or something, right? Because
Yes, that's the hardest. That is the hardest part. This year I was finally comfortable enough that I put a picture of myself and my partner on my desk. Now, it was an appropriate picture, of course, and we were on the beach. And if you were to come behind my desk, it would just look like my best friend, and that's great. But these kids are also 5 and 6. They're not. They care, but they don't care enough. But also, these kids are not asking me if I'm married. They're not asking me who I'm dating. Like, they're 5 and 6 years old. They're asking me about my cat. They're asking me why my favorite color is pink. They're also asking me to open their snack. Like, people make it this huge issue when it's really not.
yeah,
If straight couples are allowed to talk about their husbands or their wives, I feel we should also be able to and not have to hide it. But I do so for the area I am. And unless you have me on Facebook, like I have past parents that I became close with that I have accepted into my life and that are on my Facebook. And they like every single photo of me and my partner. So I know like that was the right move. But there are some that I wouldn't, just based on I know like their background. Like I wouldn't accept it because they wouldn't accept me. And so it's taken a while to get there.
yeah. Well, you remind me by saying that about, teaching 5 and 6-year-olds that I used to go to this teacher conference, this one particular teacher conference every year. And one year I finally got up the courage to go to the gay caucus, right? You know how different groups of teachers will have their caucuses, African American caucus, the Asian
Yeah.
caucus, the who knows, and then there's the gay caucus. And every year I went to this teachers conference, I wanted to go to the gay caucus, right? And but I said I'm not going because I don't want anyone to see me going in that room. And it wasn't until I then was permanent in with my district, which I'm curious to know how that works for you. Don't let me forget. But I finally went into the gay I had my colleague go with me because I came out to my colleagues my third year and probably around the same time you and did. And then she went with me. The woman at the helm of this gay caucus was a kindergarten teacher.
Yes.
I said, wow, because so many gay teachers I'd met at that point were middle or high school teachers, not too many elementary school teachers. And she taught kindergarten. And I said, well, what do you do? Like, how is it at your school and everything? What's your experience like? And she said, well, the beginning of the school year, we all share about our families and I share about mine. And it was just one of those things where she said she shares about her wife and their kids just as any straight teacher would. But during our time in the caucus that evening, she ended up saying that she had had so much pushback from her principal to the point where her principal was openly harassing her, right? Because the principal is prejudiced and bigoted and creating just a nightmare for her, this woman at work. And she had to go through the district and, file all these complaints and everything.
Yes.
It got bad, but see, it's something like that. It's just that taints your work environment if you go through crap like that.
Yes, I couldn't imagine. And that's why I'm so cautious about it. I'm not scared to hide it, but I'm cautious. And if a kid asks me if I'm married, which they don't, in my 3 years, a kindergarten student has not asked me. It's the older kiddos. I just say, no, I'm not. And then if they ask me about the ring on my finger, I'm like, that's a special promise ring. It's just a special friend promise ring. And then they move on. So that's where I am. Maybe one day I would love to be able to share like who I am right off the bat.
Yeah.
But that's just not in the cards yet.
And that's what I was going to ask you too, is with your district, what are contracts like where you work?
Like you mean like how long they are or
Yeah, and how long can you attain permanent status, like AKA tenure in your district?
yes. So you can and it depends. And what happened was I worked my 2 years in a different district and then I did private education work at a children's museum and then I came to this district. So technically I'm considered like a year 4 probationary teacher earning up to tenure. Can get tenure, I believe, after 5 years if you've been working in the same district. So I might have another year before I see that and then you have permanent status in that district, but that could also change. It depends on defining factors in Missouri too, because Missouri has certain qualifications and like goals that you have to set for yourself. But our contracts run monthly, not monthly. We get paid monthly. Woo! But they are a full year. They are a full year, but it's set. It's already set for us in our contracts. So the days we work are already set, and that's what we get paid for. Extra time spent on ourselves in our classroom is not paid for, of course, which is typical with teachers. And that's okay. I like that time that I spend.
So wait, are you saying that you will not be permanent status in your district until after you've taught for them for 5 years, or just 5 years total, counting all of your experience?
So, although technically I've had 6 years of teaching experience or some sort of education work, I am probationary. So, I am not permanent until I have that 5 years in that district.
Gotcha.
That is just the Missouri standards. It has to be in Missouri and it has to be in 5 years. So, although I believe I'm great, and they can believe I'm great unless it's recommended, and they have to go through like a school board process. That's what most of the districts in Missouri do, unless it's changed. But I know from my perspective, it's that 5 year mark.
That's interesting. And then so after those 5 years pass, is it really hard to fire a teacher like it is here in California?
As far as I know, yes.
Mm-hmm.
The stuff like in the news all over, like of random parts of Missouri that I don't know exist. Like once you're tenured, it is very hard to fire a teacher. And I wouldn't want to fire the great teachers. The great teachers need to stay, but there are teachers that I experienced in my schooling and in my college schooling that were just not made to be teachers, but because they're tenured, you can't fire them. And that's the unfortunate part. I love the idea of tenure for myself because I know I'm good and I'm in there.
Yeah.
But for some, they just see it as a paycheck versus people like me. It is my job and it's my livelihood. Like I'm a person, but I love what I do. And so that's where that fine line, trying to fire people who don't deserve the job, in my opinion, sometimes.
Yeah, or who are burnt out.
Yes.
You
And
know?
who won't leave, but they're like, you gotta go, but you can't say that.
Right. And they just don't know what else to do, which I completely relate. There's something I think with educators, especially if it's our passion, it's hard to transition into another career unless something really calls to us. And so, but for people who have just been doing it for a paycheck, I think they're just so shut down or so disconnected from themselves entirely anyway that what they wouldn't even be able to think of anything else to do. And if it's anything like the district I retired from, they're making upwards of 140, $50,000 a year. Why are they going to want to let that paycheck go? Right.
Exactly. And it's a fine line of situational and what ifs. It all depends on the person. And that's what's hard about Missouri education, but also just education in general. Every state has different laws on permanency with teaching.
Well, so I'm curious. So, because you did mention you have a picture of you and your, are you married?
I'm not married.
Okay,
No,
partner.
I wish you can tell her that.
It'll happen one day. I'll knock on
One
some wood for
day.
you. Okay. You have a picture of you and your partner on your desk. Is your partner femme presenting like you or not?
Not in the stereotypical way like me. My classroom, for preface, is Barbie themed. It's disco Barbie. I am very femme, lipstick, all of it. I love it all. However, my partner is not as femme presenting as I am. They are more mask presenting. She's got shoulder length hair. So, with the picture, obviously she's very female presenting, but definitely not femme, not pink, very neutral wardrobe. So, I'm the fun one. No. She's very fun. I love her, but it's funny. You take a picture of us and you look at us and you just know. But some femme couples you don't know.
Mm-hmm. I know because I did a whole TikTok series about this one teacher. I was going to say, oh my gosh, she's in Missouri, but no, she's not. She's in Indiana. And she got so much backlash from this one lunatic parent of one of her students last year. And I think it was because of the picture she had of her family on her desk, right? Her wife, their daughter.
Mm.
And I'm presuming, I don't know what her wife looks like, but her wife is a police officer. So I was just figuring probably butch. That's my guess.
That's a good assumption. But it's not the children's business. And if it's on my desk, that's my personal space. Now, I let my 5 and 6-year-olds come to my desk, especially for an emergency, if it's our quiet time or I'm fixing something. But they don't notice the picture because it's for me. I should be able to look at it every day, no issues. Yeah. Because it's at the end of the day, it's not that serious. If I'm in my classroom for 13 hours a day, I want to look at a picture of who I love. If I can have my best friends over my wall, my family, and my cat, I should be able to have my girlfriend.
100%. And this really gets my blood boiling when hearing you say something like that. I immediately think of all the straight teachers, and especially the women for some reason, who have their wall littered with family photos. Not just one. There's us at this sports game. This is us in Hawaii. Here we are at the beach. It's picture after picture after picture. And then it's also, let me tell you about this that just happened this weekend. Oh, we blah, 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 blah. And I'm thinking, nope. You don't get to talk about it if I don't get to talk about it.
That's how I feel in a sense. I don't necessarily say that out loud, but also the teachers that I work with, unless it comes up with the kids when we give relevant information to our lives. If a kid asked, there's no time in kindergarten. But also, if a kid asks me what I do that weekend, I tell them, but in kindergarten friendly terms, and I move on with it. But if your walls are covered with your family, that's great. The more power to you. But please don't get mad at me for having one picture on my desk. And if somebody were to ask me to take it down, I'd ask them why, and they'd have to explain why, and I don't want that answer. And that would be discrimination.
Right.
Yeah. You can't, in our policies and just in general, discriminate against anyone for race, ethnicity, or sexual orientation. And it's not anyone's business what my sexual orientation is. Not even my students. And they're 5 and 6 years old. They don't need to know that.
So I want to say when I was looking at the questionnaire you filled out for me, that you mentioned that you were almost outed at work. Is that correct?
Yes. In a previous district, I was almost outed. And it was not a time that I was comfortable to be outed. And I didn't like the area I was in. I was an outcast. I was a first and second year teacher.
Yeah.
And I had little to no support. My paychecks were maybe $600 after taxes. Like, it was not a good fit.
That was for the month?
Yeah, well, twice a month. So that was like maybe after tax, like okay, 1,200 a month. That's nothing
Nothing.
compared to what I make now, and I still think it's little. What I make now, that was nothing, and for a 23, 24-year old, that's nothing.
Yeah.
And I had gotten out of a 7-year relationship with my ex who was a male, and I just wasn't comfortable yet being my true self at work, but I was finding my true self. But I was going through a lot of issues personally, and our old district, all our rooms were connected in pod style,
Mm.
but kids had to walk through from other classrooms to get through. And same with the teachers, and the walls were very thin. And I feel like they overheard some conversations that I was having, and maybe I shouldn't have been having them on my plan time, but that's my business if I need to take care of something. But because there was issues with those other teachers, I feel like they almost outed me because they got fired mid-year, but I stayed. I should have left. I should have. If I was smart, I should have left. But I stayed and worked my butt off. And at the end of the year, I said, Sayonara, I'm out. I'm going where somebody appreciates me. And I said I was never going to teach again after that. I had a horrible first 2 years, and being almost outed and saying that I will blossom elsewhere is the worst you can tell a teacher, especially a lesbian teacher.
I've never heard of teachers getting fired mid-year. And
Yeah, you have to be really bad to get fired mid-year. It was, I was teaching third grade, and you typically don't departmentalize third grade. That's not departmentalized to like fifth grade where you teach different subjects.
mm,
We departmentalized in January after these teachers got fired and two other teachers took over. So I taught science, social studies, and writing, and two other teachers took over, and we would switch classes. And I got my butt into gear and I worked my butt off, and I showed that the other two teachers were some of the reasons why I was working the way I was. And they even asked another teacher if they thought I would stay at the end of the year. And they're like, no, because of the way she was treated, and told that she would blossom elsewhere before she was even given a chance because she's had no support. And I didn't. No curriculum, no support. I was also mentally just not there, just not aware of everything, too. It was kind of like an out of body experience, those 2 years of my life.
no, it makes complete sense. I can't believe you were teaching and they didn't give you any curriculum.
They had curriculum, but it wasn't like I taught out of my butt, basically. Like, that's how I felt. We had books, but it was just you were teaching an idea of the curriculum versus the district I have now. We have so much training on our curriculum. I love it. We have so many resources. I'm only pulling supplemental stuff for centers, which is phenomenal. So going from nothing to a lot was overwhelming, but in the best sense because I had nothing for 2 years trying to figure it out.
Um,
Like people who work there now, I'm hoping they have more resources because a lot has changed in that district. But when I was there, to me, it was god awful. And I know they were dealing with what they had with the resources, but it was a horrible experience. But it made me less naive to different races, different ethnicities, and the way people view more rural districts. So
mm,
it gave me that sense, and it made me a better teacher. But it was a horrible experience for me personally, but not for most of the kids. I'll say that I had a horrible time with some of the kids, but most of the kids I have a newfound appreciation.
that would be very hard. I remember watching this documentary years ago about they weren't homeless. They lived in mobile homes, but these kids had to walk 30 plus minutes to get to their school or maybe to the bus stop to get them to school or something wild like that. And no running water in their mobile homes. And this is America. And I'm thinking,
Yeah,
wow, I think that was in Alabama somewhere in the South, Alabama or Louisiana or somewhere like that. And people, especially from cities or larger suburbs or, places like that, I don't think our brains even register that lifestyle that is actually still going on in our country today.
yeah. No, it doesn't register. Like when kids see differences in other kids and they start pointing it out towards the end of kindergarten. Like the end of kindergarten, people start to notice eventually, like they can pinpoint different backgrounds based on what the kid is wearing or even how they smell, and they can pinpoint everything. So I don't realize it from a day to day, but if a student is realizing it, and once I see that they realize it, I'm like, wow, yeah, this is America. These kids probably went through so much just to get to school. And it's hard, and I think we should think about that more. And America, what that's supposed to be so great, doesn't care about our children's education.
Certain children's education, right?
Certain children's education, yes.
Right.
Yes.
Which is, it looks like it's just going to get so much worse, right? In the current days, just because I swear what it seems like is the people at the top are really trying to enlarge the gap, right? Because there's already a gap. You experienced
Yeah.
the gap. You came
Yes.
from one end of the gap and now you're at another end of the spectrum, but there's a gap. And they're wanting to make it even huger. It's really cruel. I'm not advocating that we need to be like a socialist society or something and everything needs to be exactly the same, but more resources do need to be funneled into certain areas just because they don't have the resources. So
I
how
agree.
how is an area like that ever going to improve without help?
Everybody needs help, and every community needs help. And once they are given help, and I've seen it, once somebody is given help, they blossom. I've seen it with students. They start at the bottom and blossom up. That's the same with resources for a community.
Yeah, because it's someone caring. Oh, someone actually cares about me. Someone cares about us. They care about our well-being or our success or, our betterment. What's the legislation like in your state right now? Is there a bunch of anti-gay bullshit going on over there too?
There, oh, there's anti-gay stuff everywhere, which it just grinds my gears. Like I don't live in Florida, but I'm all over social media, and I can't stand that they're trying to wipe away what happened at the nightclub, and people got arrested for chalking, re-chalking the crosswalk that was Rainbow Crosswalk. And they got arrested for that. I think they got released. The judge was like, this is silly, this is stupid. They released no charges. But like everything is anti gay now. And it hasn't been this anti gay for years. It has not been this loud, like in your face. And the fact that things were okay in a sense, and then all of a sudden they're not. In Missouri, we're a very, very red state, and that's okay, to each their own. But like my partner and I, it's very seldom that we hold hands when we go places in Missouri. Now, we went to California over the summer and we felt just fine, and we held hands wherever we went, like we did not care. That's where it's a fine line, just because although we live in a more conservative community, and although we feel safer than like downtown in my area. I mean, we don't hold hands going shopping like we could. Some couples do, but there's just so much is anti-gay, and then them trying to take away gay marriage. And if it was up to the state, I don't think Missouri would keep it. I really don't. That's my opinion, with what I've seen.
And have you heard of any of those transgender children cannot use the bathroom of their gender identity at school? Have you heard any of those laws trying to be passed in your state?
Not that I'm aware of. I know they're in talks, and I know people in my area or the surrounding areas have such a strong anti-trans, and I just don't understand. They see something they don't understand and they run with it, and they hate it automatically. The anti-trans children laws make no sense to me because they are children. Let them identify how they are. When I taught at the district I was in, that was horrible, and I almost left teaching over. There was a student that identified as male but born female, and they had to use the female bathroom just because it was this huge issue, because there was no transitioning going on, and there was not a policy at the time, and it was very hard for them. And I kept my mouth shut because at the time I wasn't comfortable, but in my head I'm like, this is silly. Just let them be them. As far as I know, though, there's not specific policies getting passed, but I could be wrong. But I know if Missouri had the say so, they probably would pass it.
Okay, talking about all this legislation has gotten me thinking about mental health. And I was just thinking back to that really challenging time you went through when you were coming to terms with your sexuality, right? You ended a relationship. You have really hard, shitty time at your school that you first started teaching at. Your mental health, you had made the comment something along the lines of, like you didn't even really know what was going on, right? Like you were right in a sense.
Right. Yes.
And barely, I'm figuring, making it through those days, very challenging days. So at that time, how did you, aside from kind of just checking out in certain ways of the whole situation, how did you get through that situation? How did you take care of your mental health?
I really don't know how I started. I just know I did. Um, I was in a not so healthy relationship after I ended that 7 year relationship, and it changed everything for me. And it made me view myself differently as a person. But it got to the point where my teaching was getting affected, my personal life was getting affected, and even like my relationship with my family, it wasn't bad. I was just like, I was like an out of body experience. Out of body experience. I wasn't there. And my mom was always right. She's like, something feels off. Something's not right. Are you sure you're okay? And I was in denial, denial, denial. But when your mom knows, she knows. And she didn't want to say anything because I had recently come out to her. So I think she was just trying to process everything and she thought it had something to do with that. But I was to the point where I was staying up every night and going out to the bar with the person I had and staying up till 12 a.m., waking up at 5, and driving 45 minutes to work after leaving at like 6 because we had to be there early. And then I was basically falling asleep on the way home. And I was doing that every day. And it got to the point where like I had a really bad observation and the next day I didn't come into work and I said, I'm not coming into work. I'm not doing this. And that got word out. And then I had to have a meeting with the principal at that time. And this was before all the other issues happened with the other teachers. And I was like, this is bad. Okay, this is bad. This is not who I want to be at 24. This is definitely not who I am or who I signed up to be in my own physical sense. And so I finally decided to seek help from a counselor. And she ended up figuring out that I had a strong codependency on the people I'm around. I've always been a people pleaser and I needed others. I was never by myself. I couldn't be by myself. And we had a lot of talks on codependency and depression and anxiety. So I am currently, and I'm still taking them because they help me get through the day still. I've always been depressed and had anxiety, but it got worse in college and it got worse after this relationship. And so I take antidepressants, and that's okay. They make me happy. They keep me sane. And one day I hope to be off them. But right now, it's great. And because of that counselor and therapist, I was able to get on them, and they listened to me for the first time ever. I don't know how, but I did. I read a lot of books on codependency and took a lot of quizzes. And was not diagnosed with borderline personality disorder, but they had me read books on borderline personality disorder with some of the stuff that was going on with me. So that's not diagnosed, but that was in there. This is all what they had me do to be able to overcome myself. And then I also got out of the toxic environment. That also had a lot to do with it, and that took a lot of strength to leave the district and took a lot of strength to get out of this relationship. And then here I am at almost 30. So it took a while, but it's still a learning process. But I don't know how I got out of it.
Yeah, you know what's so interesting to me, and this has been talked about, I think, on probably a few Sapphic podcasts, but there's something to be said about those of us who, because I'm trying to remember how old I was when I came out, but all throughout college, I dated men and thought I was just bisexual,
Exactly.
And when I think about the first person who I settled with, it was extremely unhealthy. And from what I'm hearing from you, that first person, right? Your first woman
Yes.
was not healthy. And someone needs to do a study on this. What is
Yes.
what is that? Especially for those of us who aren't 13 and are like, I'm a dyke, when we're just not in that space. And then we go along with our lives until we have our breakdowns. At least I had a breakdown. And then are coming to terms with our sexuality and then end up getting into a relationship with someone who is very unhealthy for us. What is that?
I don't know. I tell you, well, there are red flags from the beginning, let me tell you, and I just didn't want to see it. I'm telling you, them just getting out of jail for a DUI should have been
Mm-hmm.
my red flag, but at the time where I was, I said, I'll let it pass. Because it was the first woman, like I had been with other women, but first woman like out, that I was like, it's fine. But that left a hole in my heart because I was never considered their girlfriend. And I can't stand that person to this day. I wish them the best, but I forgave them for myself, not for them. I will never forgive them to their face. That's how bad it was.
Mm-hmm. I think
But
there is a study, any psychologist or someone out there who wants to do a study on lesbians and I'm not even talking about late in life lesbians, right? Because we're not marrying men and having kids and then saying, "Oh my gosh, I'm a lesbian," right? Not that late in life, but just
no, yeah.
just those of us, anyone actually who has only dated men, deep in comp het. You mentioned comp het in your questionnaire.
Yes.
Such a thing. It's such a thing.
It is. No one believes lesbians, but it is because my family is like, some are like, no, you're bi, and then others are like, but you dated him for so long. And I said, I don't regret that relationship, and he's still one of my friends to this day. And I truly believe I did love him, but I look back on everything, and him and I have had this conversation. He's like, he always knew in a sense, but we were so comfortable in society and so deep in compet that you let it go until you can't anymore. Like I couldn't anymore at 23, 24 years old. I couldn't anymore. I had to get it out.
Yeah. Yeah, ditto. I never had a long-term boyfriend, but I only went out on dates with men
Mm-hmm.
until I had. And I love how the universe sends us little angels in our lives because I had a coworker, my first job out of college, and she was gay. And thank God for her. And she said, "My friends and I are going out dancing tonight. Do you want to come?" And I started thinking about it. I was like, I think she's gay, but and then I said, "Yeah, I want to go. I'm coming." And sure as heck, she took me to a lesbian bar, in West Hollywood, and the rest is her story.
Oh, I love it. Her story. I love it. Oh, I've always had like coming of not age moments, but that's what I call it, coming to myself moments. But the one where I was like, I have got to give it up was my friends and I at the time went to this club that was all women. If you catch my drift, and I said, wow, I really need a girlfriend. And the rest is history. Like that's where it went. I had to see a woman in the flesh for me to be like, okay, clearly. But there were so many signs, and no one talks about that. And even in the way I teach now, I was like, how did I get through teaching before? Like, of not being myself. It's wild to me. There really needs to be psychology studies on it.
Really does. We really need them. We really need them.
Me too.
Is there anything that we didn't talk about that you'd want to talk about that you'd want to bring up?
I wish people, like in my experience while teaching, they didn't know my background and they didn't know who I was. And then they just knew that I was a lesbian or I had a girl for a partner. And they used that to every like evaluation of who I am as a person. And if they would have gotten to know me prior to making that assumption, they would know that I have very similar values. Like I just because I'm a lesbian doesn't mean I don't pray, doesn't mean I don't know the Bible, read the Bible, enjoy my life. I love my relationship with God, But I'm so lesbian. Like I want to just put it all over, but that's just who I am. And so if people didn't just run with that, it'd be a different world. But they see lesbian and they run with that before they even know who you are. And I wish more people did not do that. But also, teaching is just a part of me. Let me live.
Yeah.
I just had to put that in there. Like, I'm not making your kids gay. I'm not talking about it. I'm not teaching it. And I think that's where people get that's really misconstrued as well.
It really is. And anytime anything like that is ever said, I always think, let me think about my education. Did I ever have a gay teacher? Nope. Gee, then how did I end up gay?
Yep. Or the comments, gay and gay make gay. And I tell my families, straight and you still have a gay child. Like that, the math does not math. As the kids say, the math ain't mathin'. So
I've never heard gay and gay makes gay. I've never heard that.
I tell you what, when you have a family like mine and they drink, sometimes stuff just gets brought out. But people have said that to me before, not just my family, jokingly, and they do it because it gets a rise out of me. But they do it in good fun, and I've let them, and that's okay. But I said, straight still made gay. That's okay,
Right?
But I don't know where people get that. It's not how it works.
I saw a funny meme on Instagram recently, something along the lines of, if you don't want any gay babies, then stop having them. Something like that.
I mean, it's true. People use like media, like, don't throw it down my throats. I said, I think to myself, and when I have conversations with people that make assumptions, we grew up in a straight society. I saw no people like me. I saw butch lesbians in media my entire life. And so when I was like myself, I thought I was the only one, and I kept it to myself. And then thank you to late high school and college for the femme lesbians. And I still am the way I am. And so it has nothing to do with what we are around. My entire family was very Christian, very no sex before marriage, very valued. And so I still ended up the way I am. Like, they were so primal in their values that made me want to think more for myself. And I'm very proud of how, less conservative my mom is and less conservative my parents are now. But I think back to my childhood, I was like, I still ended up the way I am.
Yep.
Like,
Definitely. Yeah. Thanks for bringing that in. It's a good way to wrap it up.
of course.
I'm so happy that you came on my podcast today.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. I'm happy I did too. This has been a blast.
Did you give any thought to what gay thing you're doing these days?
Yes, well, besides the book I'm reading, it's very not spicy, but it's cute. It's called She Gets the Girl. It's very coming of age college book. I love it.
Okay.
It has co-authors of 5 Feet Apart in it. It's so cute. I'm not finished with it yet, but I love it. But also in our area, in the St. Louis area, we're getting ready to go to a Pride because we didn't get to go in June. In our area, sometimes they do Pride in September. So I'm excited. It's a very gay thing that I get to experience soon.
Woo! We love a good Pride.
No, I'm so excited. Yes, love it.
Well, enjoy Pride. I know there are quite a few Prides in September.
Yes, September, June, and sometimes May is when I see the most Prides, which the more power to us.
Yeah, and I want to say an ex of mine and I even went to Palm Springs Pride in November.
Yeah, sometimes. I guess it just depends on the city because not all cities want it in June.
Yeah, plus June's like 120 degrees there in Palm
Awful.
Springs. Yeah.
Even in our area, awful. 99, awful.
I feel ya. I feel ya. Well, thank you again so much for coming on.
Thank you.
And you are welcome back anytime. Could always do a part 2.
Oh, I would love that. Thank you.
And okay, here comes the outro music.